All right, let's get started. Welcome and good morning. Thank you for being here. On behalf of everyone at STRIVE, I want to welcome you to the 8th Annual STRIVE Symposium. I'm David McNeil, I'm Managing Director of STRIVE, and it's just so great to see all our old friends and our clients and in person. We just really value these chances to see you in person and shake your hand. So last year at this time, we had just opened our new office in North Dallas. It took a long time to build it, but we're very proud of how it turned out. So if you didn't get by and see us in 2023, we'd love to host you out there this year. So we're going to take this presentation and make it available to you afterwards, so don't feel the need to take any pictures of the slides if you want the information. We really appreciate our sponsors that help us make these events possible, and Madison Title is a great title company. We've got Josh Quinn, Nama Weingarten, and Sam Hertzkovitz here in the audience, so please get by and see them. They're very proactive and responsive, and they help you get deals done. They're kind of a title company that'll help you solve issues and go the extra mile. So thank you, Madison Title. We appreciate it. We have QR code information for all the sponsors on the poster boards outside, as well as all of the STRIVE team as well. Next, it is with great pleasure that I announce the two newest partners here at STRIVE, Jake Dutson and Hudson Lambert. We're really proud of these guys. Hudson has transacted on 80 properties for over $400 million since joining STRIVE in 2019. Hudson has established himself as one of the top private capital shopping center brokers in America, and he's been top producer at STRIVE 2 out of the last 3 years. Since 2021, Jake has advised his clients on over 36 transactions, totaling more than $200 million in total consideration. Jake is rapidly making a name for himself in Houston. We really appreciate his stewardship of our Houston office. These two rising stars join the ranks of our leadership team that set such a great example for us to follow at STRIVE. We're really excited about the team we've put together. We're active in retail, as many of you know, as well as industrial and office, and now multifamily this year. Our partnership with you, our clients, is our #1 priority and our most important, but our team and our people are our biggest asset. So I want all the STRIVE team to stand where you are and be recognized, even the guys on stage. So. Thank you for all you do every day, guys. I want to note that we added Stephen Crittenden, a 13-year vet in the multifamily business. He was with one of our competitors for about 10 years and has his own company for a couple of years, so we're glad to have Stephen join that growing team. But we're here for all of your property investment needs, so let us help you where we can. Last year, we were staring in the face higher interest rates and inflation, and so this year we've kind of chosen a theme of adapt and thrive. And so we have a quote from Charles Darwin that says, it kind of sums it up. It's not the strongest of the species that survive, nor is it the most intelligent. It's the one that's the most adaptable to change. So we know we've got a new, different environment this year, but we've got to get creative, adapt, and get our deals done. So we're here for you for that. As we look forward to 2024, I think we can all agree we're in the best state and the best markets in America. Looking back on STRIVE's history, in 2017, we did 63 transactions. And then we started an upward trend to 2022 with 102. Last year, we took it as a victory with 72 transactions, which was only off 30%. So that's a testament to the hard work put in by the team. We're expecting things to trend back upwards here in 2024. And since the beginning of STRIVE, we've done 1,306 transactions for a total consideration of almost $5 billion and over 31 million square feet. But we know we can't do that without you, our valued clients, so thank you. One more sponsor I've got is Hilco Insurance. Hunter Hill's in the audience. He's a great insurance agent. Please get by and see Hunter and get his information. He's really responsive, and we've had him put insurance in place in the last 24 hours to save a deal. And I want to make that point about Madison Title and Hilco. Both of them perform in crunch time, so we really appreciate that and their support of these events. So thank you, both guys. And so now I'm going to turn it over to Jason Vitorino, one of our managing partners, to talk a little bit about STRIVE's technology. Jason.
AI, bots, ChatGPT, and VR are all technology tools and platforms that are becoming widely discussed and commonplace in our daily lives. If one doesn't adapt to the constant and rapid advances in technology, they will not thrive. At Strive, we pride ourselves on being a technology company that sells real estate, so we continue to invest heavily in technology. Our goal is to build the best platform to allow our agents to be more efficient, which in turn will help all of y'all, our clients. Two main aspects of our technology platform is our automatic database and iStrive. When I started in the business 20 plus years ago, each agent would have their own separate database in a Rolodex or an Excel spreadsheet. Minimal information was readily available for properties and/or owners. Fast forward to today, with technological advancements, we created an unprecedented database of properties, owners, and buyers. An agent's database is the biggest misconception in real estate. Most people believe everybody has equal access to the information and equal access to all the buyers, but that couldn't be further from the truth. The truth is, there are thousands of agents at major brokerage companies, and each has a completely separate database without a central collaborative platform. So despite having a giant umbrella, they're all independent agents without any internal cooperation. Thus, rather than working together as a team, they function like a bunch of individual competitors. Without a central platform, there's not any communication between the agents and our offices. And information is not shared and completely siloed. Nothing is integrated. So one arm doesn't talk to the other. Leasing agents don't talk to the investment sales agents. Investment sales agents don't communicate with each other. Appraisers don't talk to the agents. So despite being a national or global company, when you hire an agent from one of those firms, you get one agent and their measly handmade database. Alternatively, with a collaborative team effort, we created an integrated platform for all of us to benefit from. All 30 of us at Strive are collaborating and constantly updating every property in the state of Texas, complete with every pertinent piece of information, like owners, their companies, their phone numbers, and email addresses. Furthermore, we're the first to automate this process. Through bots and crawlers, we are automatically extracting properties and all the property data from title companies and CAD websites for all retail, office, industrial, and now multifamily properties in Texas. We create direct links to third-party websites and dumping this data into our system. Today, our AutoDB contains over 108,000 properties and with all the necessary information. After gathering the property information, we automatically obtain investor names by piercing entity ownerships and programmatically obtaining their phone numbers and email addresses. We currently have 121,000 properties complete with accurate information. Having a property-specific database, we know who owns which properties, and as a result, we can start to identify buying trends. And with AI, we can match properties that are currently on the market with buyer-specific criteria and push those high-probability leads to our clients. Again, this is all automated, so we're saving a significant amount of time for our agents to allow them to spend more time with you, to provide you all with the two most important things in real estate: information and deals. The second main aspect of our technology is iStrive. Along with our AutoDB, we created a platform to house every property that's currently on the market and all the properties that have sold. We are all bombarded with property emails today, and rather than ignore them, delete them, or unsubscribe from them, we're saving them, downloading the marketing packages, and collecting all the property information. Furthermore, we're tracking the internet for all the properties on the market and everything that's sold in Texas. Through APIs, we're scraping third-party websites and dumping everything into iStrive. So again, we have every property that's currently on the market and all the pertinent information for those that have sold. So now I'm going to demonstrate a few of the many features of iStrive. This is our landing page or our stats page. And when agents log in each morning, this is the first screen that appears. So this is an infograph with key metrics that we're tracking. As David mentioned, we closed 72 properties worth $277 million last year. And over the last 2 years, we closed more than 175 transactions worth $750 million. By having all this information, we can start to identify trends like average price per square foot, if cap rates are going up or down, and things like where the buyers are coming from. 63% of the time a property sold in the state of Texas last year, it went to a Texas buyer, and that's up from the prior year. This slide depicts all our current inventory that's active on the market. We have 79 properties worth $361 million of exclusively representing properties that are readily available to sell. But not only are we tracking our own stuff, we're tracking everything externally as well. So with these filters, I took multi-tenant retail properties that are currently on the market in DFW, and there are 79 properties worth $361 million, and we have all the information for that. We collect all the marketing packages, and hence we have all the financial information, like the price, the cap rate, the NOI, and the rent rolls. But as I mentioned before, we're not just doing this for DFW, we're doing this for the entire state of Texas. So we are currently tracking 1,100 properties, retail properties, that are currently on the market in Texas worth $4.6 billion. And we have all the information. So if you're a 1031 buyer and you need properties, we have access to everything on the market. If you're a developer negotiating rents with a certain tenant, we have all the rent rolls of a number of different properties and what they're paying in certain markets around the state of Texas. Another aspect of iStrive is our escrow tracking sheet. This is a step-by-step process of everything that happens when we put a property under contract all the way to close. We know what should happen and when it should happen, and we check it off the list because we want to control the process to stay 2 steps ahead to have the highest probability of closing. This is a service that we provide for our clients. And so thinking about closings, since we close a lot of properties and there's a lot of, and we track everything that closes on the market, we have a substantial comp database. So in this case, I took all the Christian Brothers Automotive that have closed, and I can select or unselect certain properties. So if one's a little bit higher cap rate, I can uncheck the box, right mouse click, and boom, there's my comp spreadsheet in a PDF. And so again, when we put a property under contract, we send this to appraisers. We're sending them the PSA, we're sending them the marketing package, and we're sending the comps. Again, we want to control the process to have the highest probability of closing and to make sure the appraised value comes in on target. Or if a buyer needs justification of a property that they're buying, we can justify the pricing by providing them comps. Again, this platform is much more elaborate than the brief summary, but in the sake of time, I just wanted to highlight several of the main key features of iStrive. We are gathering this information to be a service to you. By having this specific information, we understand where properties should be priced, we have opportunities for buyers, and we can filter the data to provide specific information to allow you to make educated decisions with your real estate investments. Equipped with this information, we're here to help. So if we can be of service to you, please don't hesitate to contact any one of us here at Strive. We want to thank Bailey Brower for their friendship, for their service, for their support, and continual sponsorship of this symposium. Alex Brower and his firm, Bailey Brower, are top litigators in the state of Texas and throughout the country. They help their clients find practical solutions when business disputes arise. But with that being said, they're not afraid to enter the courtroom if a trial is warranted. So if you have any contract disputes or real estate issues, we highly recommend you contact Alex at Bailey Brower. And now for the next part of the presentation, I want to introduce my friend and business partner, Jennifer Pierson.
Thank you, Jason. Yeah. So we're going to dive into the property verticals section of our program. And I thought it would be interesting to start off with what's going on across the United States. So you can see in this slide, we're talking about the top 10 markets for commercial real estate trades in the United States. New York is at the top, and they've been at the top for like the last 20 years. But it is notable that in 2021, Dallas-Fort Worth was at the top of this grid. What you're looking at is the lines are composed of different product types. So the gray indicates office, the orange indicates industrial, the yellow indicates retail, and the blue is multifamily. So New York did $19.8 billion in 2023, and Dallas-Fort Worth was right behind them with $19.7 billion. And it's also notable on this slide that Houston, Texas is the fourth on the list at $13 billion. So as Texas continues to become a brighter spot on the US map, we expect this trend to continue and the Texas cities to keep moving up on this grid. Now we're going to move into individual property verticals, and we are going to, go ahead and click for me, Stephen. We're going to start with Stephen Crittenden in multifamily. He's going to walk us through what's happening in the state of Texas for multifamily. Stephen?
Thanks, Jennifer. In 2023, there were 881 trades. This is down from the previous year, 1,039. In 2022, there were 580 trades compared to 2023, 238, with a negative delta of 342. This is largely due to rising interest rates, lower leverage. We had 3 bank failures, and banks are more cautious. We had a negative price per unit of $22,644, but there were 3 trades above $300,000 per apartment unit in Arlington, Garland, Uptown, and Plano. Market occupancies dipped 238 basis points. This is largely due to tenants feeling the effects of inflation and the end of the COVID rent relief package. In Houston, there were 479 trades compared to 2023 of 192. This is a negative delta of 287. Buyers in Houston expect a 10 to 15% drop in pricing, or discounted pricing, excuse me. Average price per unit declined $39,331 per apartment unit, but there was 1 trade above $250,000 per apartment unit. Market occupancies dipped in Houston 166 basis points. Tenants feeling the effects of inflation and the end of COVID rent relief package. I will note that operating expenses such as insurance and real estate taxes have increased 200%.
Thank you, Stephen. Now we're going to move into the office sector, and Parker Timms is going to walk us through what's going on in office. Parker?
Thanks, Jennifer. For office in 2023 in the state of Texas, we saw 625 total transactions, and this is compared to the 1,217 that we saw in 2022. One thing I do want to note is out of the 625 properties I did trade in 23, 60% of them were in the Houston and DFW office markets. First thing I want to show you is the office market in DFW at a more micro level. As you can see here in 2023, we had 207 properties that traded compared to the 416. And the average price, we saw a decrease at $4.2 million, as well as a 70 bip increase in the average cap rate. And the last thing I want to show you is the average price per square foot. We saw an increase at $13 per square foot, and this is due to a few different transactions. One notable one is One Legacy at 121 in Plano. We saw trade at $48 million, or $224 per square foot. One thing I do want to note about that is it was also had one of the highest square footages out of any of the office buildings that did trade in the DFW market. Next thing I want to show you is the Houston office market at a more micro level. For 23, we saw 165 properties trade compared to the 269, and similar to the Dallas market, we saw a decrease in the average price. Here we see it decrease by $3.7 million, as well as a 60 bip increase in the average cap rate. Different from the Dallas market, however, is we saw a significant decrease in the average price per square foot. Here we see it nearly at $60 And this is due to multiple different distressed office sales in the Houston market. One notable one I want to point out is the San Felipe Plaza, nearly 2 million square foot office building. It traded at $104 million, but it was only at $57 per square foot. Last thing I want to show you is something interesting. This is where we track all the key card data of people going back into the office in major office markets throughout the US. And basically what this means is anybody that uses their key card to go into the office and swipe it, or they swipe it to go into the parking garage, we track that. As you can see here, we have the blue in Austin, orange is Houston, the red is Dallas, the yellow is New York, and the brown is San Francisco. As you could have guessed, this first major dip is notorious. COVID-19 in 2020, where it shut the world down, and of course this pertains to the office market as well. We saw occupancies go as low as 8%. And then the next one I want to show you is the famous February 2021 Snowmageddon. And this really just pertains to Dallas markets and the Austin markets. Of course, not nearly as much the Houston market being so far down south, but it definitely did hinder the office occupancies in the DFW markets. And the last thing I want to show you is January 2023. And this is us just really just highlighting during the holidays. You know, people are just traveling naturally, and naturally occupancies are going to drop during Thanksgiving, Christmas, and New Year's time. And some of these other dips you see also could have been due to, you know, just the appearance of a few different COVID variants. But the one thing I do want to point out is, as you can see, clearly the Texas markets led the charge back into office. We had Houston had a slight advantage over Dallas, with Austin just sandwiched in between.
Thank you, Parker. Now, Jeff Williams is going to walk us through what's going on in the industrial markets. Jeff?
Thank you, Jennifer. The criteria that we used to put these slides together, we used 1 million square feet minimum, $1 million sales price and 5,000 square feet. As you can see, as we dive into the first slide, there was 1,914 trades for all of Texas. This is down from the prior year, 1,260. And as we dive into the industrial transactions for all of DFW, you can see that we're slightly down. This one here, we had 751 in 2023 compared to 2022 of 1,090, down 339. The interesting thing about this slide, though, is the average price went up 1.1 million. There was 68 trades that were over 100,000 square feet. One notable one that was over 1 million square feet. So we saw a pretty big slight uptick in that. Your cap rates expanded 180 basis points. This is due just to the Feds raising the rates so rapidly over 2023. And if you look at also your average price per square foot went up $5 per square foot. This is due to the rental rates going up, but also to the flight of quality of product. We also saw a slight uptick in the average rent per square foot at $1.76 per foot. Now we're going to dive into the industrial transactions for all of Houston. As you can see, we're down not quite half from the year prior. We had 496 in 2023 compared to 2022 at 968. The average price did go down 1.2 million, but the interesting thing about this slide is the cap rates. Barely went down, barely saw any change. This is just due to several 4- and 5-star trades that we saw over the Houston market. One big notable trade was the Men's Warehouse Distribution Center that sold just last month at over 800,000 square feet. If you look at your average price per square foot, up 23 cents per foot. And then we saw a slight uptick in the average rents per square foot at 42 cents per foot. And that concludes the Houston and DFW markets.
Thank you, Jeff. Another one of our sponsors is High Street Capital. They are a mortgage brokerage firm that we work very closely with. They close with us probably 60 to 70% of the properties that we close, they put debt on them. The interesting thing about High Street Capital is we have a high level of trust with them and they're very good. But the reason that they're good is because they They find the lenders who are putting out money when nobody else is. They have surprised us over and over again with finding debt for product at low interest rates and really attractive terms. So thank you, High Street Capital, for your partnership and for sponsoring the symposium this year. And now we're going to move into the retail portion of our symposium, and Hudson Lambert is going to walk us through the multi-tenant trades for DFW. Hudson?
Thank you, Jennifer. We saw 385 trades across the state of Texas in 23. Volume was down just over 45% from 22, and this is largely due to the increase in rates we saw in such a short period of time. This is not indicative of the current demand we have for retail. It's a highly sought after asset class, and there's a ton of new buyers trying to break into the market. Here we show where a majority of the buyers are coming from. While we had trades with buyers from all over the country and all over the globe, the local buyer pool continued to dominate the market. In fact, as you can see, 84% of the trades were with local Texas residents. This is largely because multi-tenant retail has a management component to it, and buyers like to be local to their assets, and also Texans are just getting more bullish on owning retail real estate in their own backyard. Here we break down some of the key stats for the trades in Dallas-Fort Worth. We saw 112 trades in 23. Volume was down just over 55% from 22. The average price went up considerably, and this is because as the market got so tight, buyers were seeking deals with higher yields. They wanted to find deals with higher cap rates, and they were able to find those deals in the larger price points. So we saw a number of deals trade in the $10 to $30 million range in 23. The average cap rate increased 67 basis points to an average of 6.81% in 23. This seems minimal as interest rates rose over 400 basis points. The average price per foot and average rent per foot both went down slightly. Keep in mind, this is only for the properties that traded. Because of those larger transactions, we saw these both decline, but if you look at the rental rates across the market, they continue to surge. We reached a record level of occupancy across the Metroplex. We had 95.2% in 23, and this is because of the very limited retail supply we have under development. We only have 1 million square feet of retail under development, and that's half of what we typically had pre-COVID-19. This is a great slide for any owners or developers of strip centers across DFW. So the criteria we use is anything less than 20,000 feet and the year built's newer than 2015. We saw 27 of these trades in 23. Volume was down just over 50% from 22. The average price went up slightly, and that's just because of the rising rental rates we've seen across the market. The average cap rate increased 52 basis points to an average of 6.26% in 2023. The average price per foot and average rent per foot both went up slightly, and again, that's because of the very limited supply we have coming online and the increasing tenant demand and the increasing rental rates we see across the market.
Thank you, Hudson. Sticking with multi-tenant retail, our market leader in the Houston market, Jake Dutson's going to walk us through what's happening for retail in Houston. Jake?
Thanks, Jennifer. In the Houston market last year, we saw 127 shopping centers transact, just over 50% reduction from the year prior. And like the rest of these guys said, rising interest rates made deals tough to pencil if debt was involved, tough to get lenders across the finish line as well on those deals that involve debt, and certainly a lack of supply, many sellers taking a wait-and-see approach and kind of holding off on taking their assets to market. So reduced trade volume. The average sales price came in at $7.7 million, which was an increase from 2022 and a pretty high average. It's indicative of the types of assets we're selling. A lot of bigger shopping centers, I think over a dozen 100,000 square foot properties traded in the Houston market. Many of those had value-add components to them. Vacant anchor spaces we saw, a handful of REO sales. There was the Hartman REIT doing their restructure and getting out of retail, so a handful of their assets came to market in Houston. And buyers were certainly seeking that type of deal. Like Hudson said, they were looking for yield. They were looking for opportunities to add value. So these bigger assets were a big reason for a lot of these stats. If you look at the average cap rate, 7.12 cap, and that is, there was a mixed bag of cap rates, certainly some aggressive sales for quality real estate, mainly strip centers, And some of these bigger assets had more compressed go-in returns, so compressed cap rates that there was also some bigger deals that sold over an 8 cap, so really a good mix of cap rates last year in Houston. The average price per square foot and the average rent per square foot of these transactions both decreased. Some bigger anchor spaces selling or big box type properties, which was not the case in 2021, 2022, where we saw more stabilized property selling. And not really indicative of the market as a whole. The Houston market rental rates are certainly climbing. Houston's been one of the top markets the last 3-4 years in terms of absorption. So, and that's nationally. Rental rates are certainly climbing in Houston. Our occupancy rate's over 95%. Like Hudson just showed, these are strip centers, so deals less than 20,000 square feet, built after 2015. These are what a lot of our clients are developing right now, typically suburban growth areas. These are unanchored retail strips that are in near master plan communities, certainly what tenants are chasing and buyers as well. We saw 24 of these trade for an average price of just over $5 million and an average cap rate close to 6.5, which is compressed and probably surprises a lot of people, but we saw buyers targeting these assets and figuring out ways to make them work. They're putting down 40-50% equity. They were buying them all cash. They were assuming sellers' existing financing. They were having sellers finance the deals, really getting creative to buy these assets that are in high growth areas that tenants are attracted to, and one of the most desirable assets in the market right now. We saw the average price per square foot, the average rent per square foot increase for these deals that sold almost $500 a square foot, and rental rates at almost $35. So again, some of the most desirable assets in the market today are these unanchored retail strips in high growth areas of Houston.
Thank you, Jake. Now, sticking with retail, we're going to move into single tenant retail, and Adam Gottschalk's going to walk us through that. Adam.
Thank you, Jennifer. So last year in 2023, we had 830 single tenant net lease trades. This was down a little over 58% from the year prior that had just shy of 2,000 trades. Since we've been tracking this data for the last 7 years, we've historically had over 50% of our buyer pool of single tenant Texas properties be Texas residences. And so last year we're just shy of 55%. And like Hudson talked about earlier on multi-tenant requiring a little more of a management component, there's clearly not as much management with single tenant net lease, triple net deals. The other 45% came from really all over the country, and even a small amount of that came from global buyers as well. And diving into the numbers here, this is just in DFW. I want you to pay attention to the number of deals that transacted last year. We had 298 trades. And if you guys remembered, in 2022, we had 7 interest rate hikes. So I also talked about the inchworm effect, where rates would go up, cap rates and price expectations would change. Last year, we only had, I say only, but we had 4 interest rate hikes, with the last one happening in July. So a lot of our pricing correction really happened towards the end of the year. So our delta list to sell, list cap rate, and the sold cap rate would be a difference of about 43 basis points. And looking into the data set here, 15% of our single tenant net lease trades that happened in DFW were single tenant deals that were all over $1,500 a square foot. So think of Starbucks, Dutch Brothers, Salad and Go, other coffee concepts. And so that coupled with the smaller amount of transactions really kind of skewed the average price per square foot and average rent per square foot. So you'll see, I mean, there's a huge rent jump that happened in the last year. But if I scrape out every deal that was, let's call it under 1,500 square feet, our average rent per square foot for single tenant deals is just shy of $35 a square foot. And now I'll pass it to Jackson, who will touch base on some Houston property.
Thanks, Adam. We tracked 144 single tenant retail trades in Houston last year. This was down just over 55% from the 336 we saw the year prior. We also saw a decrease in our average sale price. This was roughly the same delta that we saw from 21 to 22. In this rising interest rate environment, buyers are now needing to put anywhere from 40 to 50% down to see any cash flow on these single tenant trades. We did see an increase in cap rates after compressing for several years. Our average cap rate was 29 basis points higher than that of 2022. And with the average sale price decreasing, it was interesting to see this big jump in our average price per square foot going from $702 up to $796 per square foot. A significant factor playing into this is that in Houston, 1/3 of our single tenant trades were to quick service restaurants. These all average a price per square foot north of $1,000. The remainder of the trades was a relatively even mix of these other uses. Adam?
Thanks, and I'm gonna bounce back here to, this is single tenant retail transactions by use. So this is a really interesting slide to kind of give you a snapshot of, this is Texas as a whole. So this is product that's 15 years of lease, product that's sold at 2 years of lease term. I think we were really excited from a single tenant standpoint to, we were awarded through Walgreens Corporate doing a few of their sale leaseback locations throughout Texas. And obviously we have the Christian Brothers national account, but you'll notice that banks, fast food, and new restaurant developments all saw big decreases in cap rate from last year, where auto parts, dollar stores, drug stores, and gas C-stores all saw an increase, mostly due to the interest rate rises, as well as excess inventory in the market, and then also just the ability to finance deals. I mean, like, I know that Jackson talked about it, but in order for these deals to cash flow, it's either all cash buyers or you're putting 40, 50, sometimes 60% down. What's interesting to just note here on the drugstores, that had the biggest increase, and even though the corporate did do a bunch of sale leasebacks that were probably in the lower 5 cap range, what started to happen was a lot of the current owners who had existing drugstores that were the flat rent for perpetuity, those deals hit the market at a much higher cap rate, which kind of averaged out higher, which made the average closer to in the low 6 range. But all in all, this gives you the overall snapshot of retail use over the last 3 years.
Thanks, Adam. As you can imagine, at Strive, we spend a tremendous amount of time working on and perfecting our skills around closing real estate transactions. We do not spend a lot of time practicing being on stage and presenting in front of a very large group of people, but I think we did a pretty good job. Good job. Yep, you guys can go off. I just want to mention one more sponsor, Sage IT. All of the data that Jason presented was due to our partnership with Sage IT. They're our technology partner. They are revolutionizing business clock speeds with cutting-edge information technology and exceptional talent. We can vouch for that. Thank you, Sage IT, for sponsoring our symposium. And now, without further ado, we are going to move into the keynote speaker portion of our program. I was talking with one of our clients, one of you who's in the audience, and he said, I follow economists closely and have been for the last 20 years, and I've been following Mark Dotzour for the last 20 years, and he is the most accurate that I've seen, and he's quite entertaining. Please help me in welcoming Mark Dotzour.
Thank you very much. Howdy, it's great to be here with you all today. I would like to just get started. There's a lot to talk about. Before I do, there's quite a bit of hard news that we have to digest on a daily basis. I spend my life doing that, trying to filter that all down into real estate decisions. I've been doing that my whole life, basically, since the 1980s. And there's a lot to think about, but I just want to kind of summarize my overall thinking a little bit, because the presentation then will provide you with the facts and the information that's supporting my fundamental belief in where we're at right now with commercial real estate. I feel like that we're on the verge of another one of those generational buying opportunities for commercial real estate. And I don't do Zig Ziglar power positive thinking, let's put some lipstick on a pig and sell something kind of speech. Nobody ever hires me for motivation. And I will never say anything that I don't fully believe here. But this marketplace kind of, is there anybody in the room here that's willing to admit that you were with me in the real estate market in the 1986? Anybody in the room remember? Do you remember what a buying opportunity was created about 3 years after that happened? It was astounding. It changed. There are people in this room that their lives changed forever because of the opportunity to buy real estate in the aftermath of the Tax Reform Act of 1986. People ask me, is this like 2008? What recession or whatever is this like? And in my mind, it's very similar to what happened in '86. If you're young enough, power to you, and I'm happy for you, and you don't know what happened in 1986, it would be good for you to know it. And to understand what happened in 1986, you have to understand what happened in 1981. And so you figure out what happened in '81, changed tax laws. I'll give you a little bit of a clue right now. I'm an old college professor. Changed tax laws in '81, made it too good, overbuilt the market everywhere on earth. And then in 1986, they took those toys away. And at that point, I was in Austin at the time. I was in the middle of my PhD program, watching it on a daily basis. Commercial real estate values across the board went about minus 40% just overnight. You just changed the rules. And so I feel like in a certain kind of way, there's some similarity here. It's nothing of that magnitude. But the concept, I think, is going to play out pretty much the same. Instead of changing tax code to what's happened is we've changed the cost of money. Now, in my lifetime, I would have never said the government changed the cost of money, because the market, up until the last decade, the market determines the cost of money. But in this particular case, our government chose to make the cost of money nothing, and it made a policy error by leaving it at nothing for too long. And so now they're unwinding that policy, and that's the similarity between '86. When you unwind a policy, you put too much in place, you take it out, prices have to adjust. The title of my presentation is Investing in a Vortex of Government Policy Errors, okay? And why I came up with this, so I'm sitting in College Station and just reading stuff and preparing for the next season's presentations. And I started getting phone calls in the summer. Actually, this is summer. Yeah, it was early this summer. And these happen to be guys, but could be men and women. But the three people that called me were guys, and they'd been in the business forever, like back to the '70s, and doing business nationally across the board in development of multifamily or industrial. And those guys said, "Let's talk, because I don't understand what's going on." And so that's what caused me to think about what is causing the difficulty here of analyzing markets. And I came to this conclusion that we don't have significant recessions in our country unless your government makes a big error. And so that led me to start thinking about these policy errors. And so if you've ever scratched your head in the last 24 months and go, look, I know this business. I'm as good as you can get in my business, and some of the stuff that I'm seeing does not make sense. Here's why. This is why I wanted to bring this to you. Chances are you know every one of these, but chances are you've never seen them all in a list on one sheet of paper, because this is what buyers are thinking. This is what sellers are dealing with. For some reason, the Fed kept mortgage rates at 2 3/4 for way too long. Inventory was low, home prices were spiking, and the Fed kept mortgage rates way too low for way too long, and now houses are not affordable. It's too bad. It's sad, and that's not going to go away. We're never going to be able to build enough homes to keep up with the population growth. Sure, in places where nobody wants to live anymore, yeah, they're not going to worry about housing shortages. But in places, you saw a list of some of the cities, but in places like Texas and Florida and Arizona and North Carolina and Georgia and South Carolina, people want to move there for a future, and they're going to have continuous housing shortages. Did you ever wonder, just for fun one night, I wonder what it would be like if the federal government just printed $4 trillion and gave it away? Wonder what would happen. Well, you see exactly what happened, because that's exactly what they did. Isn't this fun? If they would just give away $4 trillion every year, it's pretty fun. until it's not. I want to address that because their fun is coming to an end, and it's going to affect you and me as their fun comes to an end. Some cities confuse peaceful protest with anarchy. There's just places in this country, I coined the phrase about 2 years ago. I got so tired of ESG investing, ESG this, ESG that. I thought, I'm making up my own. That's what you can do when you get to be my age. You can just make up your own. And I came up with the SPA quotient. If you have a community that has a positive SPA quotient, I want to invest in your community. If you have a negative SPA quotient, I don't want to have anything to do with you. That's why I don't own TIAA Cref's real estate account anymore. I was in there for 25 years. What's a SPA quotient? SPA. S is the safety of the people that live in the area. P is the protection of businesses that operate in the area. And A is a positive attitude toward business. If you've got those three things, I want to invest there. If you don't, I wouldn't invest a penny with you. So places like Portland, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Chicago, New York, Baltimore, Philadelphia, Minneapolis, they're not going to have near as much of a housing shortage up there. People like to live in a place that they feel safe and protected. It's as simple as that. The good news is, over the long term, even some of these areas that really let things get away from them, they're starting to say, maybe we got to do something different. But it's going to take time. It can take, once you lose the urban vibe like these communities have lost, and it's funny to watch how they describe it. It's like, wow, this is down in our town, this is down. It's all related to COVID, and it's all related to go back to work kind of thing. No, it's not. It's related to, it's no fun to be in your city anymore. It's no fun to be afraid when you go to work. You fix that, then people will come back. China made a big mistake. They're a subcontractor for America. They've always been a subcontractor for America. And they made a decision to go on the other team with Russia, North Korea, and Cuba. You know, as far as I'm concerned, they can have 100% market share of all three of those marketplaces. We're the biggest customer on earth. And a bunch of people in Western democracies are the big customers on earth. And you don't tell your big customer that you're their enemy going forward. And all of this talk about the US dollar not being the reserve currency in the future, that's a waste of energy too. I remember people asking me that 10 or 15 years ago, and they were talking about buying gold and silver at the time, and I remember saying, if you're even thinking about buying gold, I would just recommend you take cocaine, because at least you'll feel good before it kills you, okay? And what's funny is, everybody on earth except one person thought that was funny. It was the dean of the business school at A&M. He got mad at me for saying that. And then 2 days later, he called me back, and he was my buddy again. And he goes, hey, I got a speech to give in about 3 weeks. Could I have a copy of your slides? And what I surmised was a couple big donors from Houston probably called him and said, that was really funny, and it's quite accurate too. So the dean was the only guy that couldn't think that was funny. But this is going to change industrial distribution. Why I talk about that in front of commercial real estate audiences is, for the last 20 years or so, it's been, let's make it in Shanghai and let's ship it to Long Beach and then put it on trains and trucks and get it across the country. That is over. People can't wait to get out of China as fast as possible. So I'm totally bullish. There's going to be some reshoring in America, but we got a little problem with that. We don't have enough workers to do that. So what I think is going to happen is we're going to see a resurgence of the whole NAFTA corridor thing going forward again. So if I could short industrial and long industrial, I would short the China to New York trade route, and I would go long the Monterrey, Mexico to New York trade route. So these professionals know exactly what I'm talking about. Ask them about that. They know exactly where that is. We've got a complete lack of immigration policy. I'm so tired of Republicans and Democrats. I view both of those parties as the biggest blight on our economic future. It doesn't matter who's president of the United States the last 40 years. We don't get an immigration policy that works. And what I don't understand is like recently, so we have all these immigrants, take New York City for an example. You got a whole bunch of them there, and we want to provide health care, we want to provide housing, we want to provide education. And then I find out, just in a little byline, somebody said, oh, and by the way, there's a shortage, we're not processing them to get a job. And this is what's been going on for 40 years. And now, right now, as we talk today, they're talking about, oh boy, the Senate says they got a bill, and the president says he might like it, and other people say, I'm not going to vote for it, all right? That's just common. This government does not care about immigration. I'm convinced that they're using it as a political football with no intention of ever resolving it. Why am I saying that? Because I mean, the reason that matters to real estate decisions is that means we're going to have a permanent labor shortage, just like we have a permanent housing shortage. And with that said, the cost of labor is going to go up. And when the cost of labor goes up a lot, guess what? Inflation gets a lot stickier. And all of a sudden, the cost of the 10-year treasury and mortgage rates for commercial real estate get sticky too. The current immigration policy is going to bankrupt many cities. It's like, okay, it must be fun to be the mayor of some city and go, we're a sanctuary city. I'm the mayor. Thanks for inviting me to Rockefeller Center, Lincoln Center. Thanks for giving me a medal for being a nice guy, nice Santa. I'm Santa Claus, really. And as long as you don't have to do anything about it, it's really fun. And then all of a sudden, you have to do something about it, and you don't have the checkbook, and you're bankrupt. Not St. Louis, New York, Chicago, Denver, all of these, Minneapolis, all of these sanctuary cities have written checks they can't cash. And so something's going to have to give. But again, I don't want to invest in places where they don't live within their means. And our federal government is getting to a place where it's not living within its means either. I'll talk about that in a little bit. The housing shortage began 15 years ago. I've been begging the National Association of Home Builders, the American Bankers Association, and the National Association of Realtors. They all have big political action campaign budgets. Please put this at the top of your list for solving it. And how you do that, there's only one way we're going to solve this housing shortage, and that is you're going to have some kind of program, government incentive to create new houses. Can you visualize in your mind any time where the federal government would actually encourage land developers by offering them cheap mortgages to build subdivisions? I can't. But that's what it's going to take. We're going to need something like that, and if we don't, we're just going to have a continuous shortage of housing in the parts of the country that have a growing population. That's going to put pressure on prices. I tell young people right now, you think prices are high right now, wait for 5 years and see what they're like 5 years from now. They're going to be higher yet. So that's what we live in. So the major questions for investors and business owners is, are we going to have a recession or not? What's the outlook for inflation? Because what we're really interested in, inflation's interesting, but that's not life and death when it comes to commercial real estate. But inflation has an impact on the cost of money. And so what's the outlook for interest rates, and then the outlook for commercial real estate? Forecasting is pretty embarrassing business. They always say economists were put on earth to make the weatherman look good, and that's pretty accurate. But I come out every year, I don't pay any attention to what other economists are doing. I could care less what blue chip economists' consensuses are. That's no fun. I like to do my own thing, but I come out every year now against a forecast of a recession coming in the fourth quarter or the first quarter, whatever year it is. Bank of America in 2022, Deloitte in 2022 and 23, the Conference Board in early 2023, and Forbes comes out and says we're still right for a recession in early 2024. I don't know where these things are coming from. And I see it all the time. Fancy universities come out with that. It's a place like MIT. I don't know if you ever heard of them, but they're a community college back east. Got a good basketball program. but their forecasters are just as bad as everybody else, but they come on the news. We're not going to have a recession this year either. Keep in mind, I'm an economist, so that means there's a 50% chance everything I say is wrong. And so far, I haven't been wrong very much for 20-some years now. So I'm due for a big one. This might be the year. A year from now, you might go, hey, we got that on tape, dude. No recession. I'm going out on a limb. That's fine with me. Not because it's my opinion, it's the facts. I want to show you the facts. I'm pretty dangerous in a court of law right now because I got nothing but facts in my book here. I will offer you my opinion about how I view the analysis, but that's not my goal today. My goal is to give you the information, offer you my take on it, so that you then, as a professional, can go with what you know and modify it. I want to go to this one. This is my favorite one. Alan Greenspan, he was chairman of the Federal Reserve back in the 90s, and he made a speech before the International Monetary Fund. The fact that our econometric models at the Fed, the best in the world, have been wrong for 14 straight quarters doesn't mean it might not be right in the 15th quarter. That's what we're dealing with, okay? I love this man because he's super honest. So, with that said, how strong is the economy? Are we going to have a recession? To answer that question, you got to break it down into two components. How's the consumer doing? That's 70% of the economy right there. And how's business doing? What are their attitudes? So let's get with it here. And you make your own mind. I'll tell you right up front, I can't cook very well, but I do know how to make chili. And I know what the recipe is. Put 5 or 6 ingredients in a pot, and 2 hours later, you got a nice bowl of chili. Well, I also know what kind of ingredients are required to have a recession, and I'm not seeing any of the ingredients in there. So as I was preparing for this presentation, I've been working on it since the last middle of October. I'm hearing all of this and thinking, I'm not seeing it. Everybody's saying there's a recession. I don't see the ingredients for it coming yet. Number one, you hear that Americans are tapped out, and they've used up all their credit. Now they're doing their credit cards. This is a household debt service as a percent of your disposable income. That's kind of a mouthful, but it's real simple. Disposable income is what you got after you pay taxes. And debt service is how much you're paying on your loans. And back in 2008, this peaked at 13%. I remember giving speeches up here and all over the place going, it appears that there's no limit to how far Americans will go into debt. Well, we found out there was. And so what you can see here, the American people have refinanced their debt, just like the federal government's done, just like real estate owners have done. And as we sit here today, it's way low. So the idea that American consumers are tapped out, I'm looking at that and going, I'm not seeing tapped out here at all. What this means is there's a lot of dry powder. There's probably private equity people in this firm, you understand, dry powder. American consumers still have dry powder, and plenty of it. And what do Americans do if they've got money? They spend it. That's our comparative global advantage. There's no one that can outspend an American. If you've got money, you're going to do it. It's your patriotic duty when we're in a recession, but we're not in a recession yet. Here's another one. You go, oh, yeah, the wave of defaults is going to happen here, and credit's getting shaky. I've never read a FICO blog before. Have you? At age 69, I found it pretty invigorating, actually. FICO blog. FICO scores hit a historic high. The FICO scores in America have never been higher. That doesn't fit in with what I hear on TV or read in the news either. Here's another one. This one I like. Excess savings has been tapped out. The American people have tapped out their excess savings. Number one, Google excess savings and see what the definition is. See if you can even find it. I mean, it's harder to find out who really invented Bitcoin than it is to find out the definition of excess savings. It's not a word. It's not a phrase. But here's one I can understand. I'm a simple guy. Common sense, simple thinking, that's me. That should be my middle name. Simple. Total checking accounts, savings accounts, and money markets. You get that? In 2020, there was 14.2 trillion in there, and 2 years later, in 2022, there was 18 trillion. When I said the government printed and gave away $4 trillion, that wasn't a euphemism. That wasn't a nuanced answer. That's a fact. And as I'm looking at this, do you see this being tapped out? Do you see that excess savings just being drained out of there? I don't at all. So I don't believe that one either. I'll believe it when I see the numbers. Real estate values, total assets for households went from 34 trillion in 2020 to 48 trillion. It went up almost $15 trillion in 3 years. And so I put a little note to myself in here. Property values could drop $15 trillion and real estate would just be back to 2020 levels. Okay? It's not going to be the end of the world if property values drop 10, 20, 30%, depending on the property type. Actually, you could drop back a little bit, and I would be going, you know what? I don't see a real bargain just yet, because all you did was we've dropped from where it got to in 2022 back down to 2020, and I don't remember thinking in 2020 that real estate was real estate is never a screaming bargain unless you have one of those once-in-a-generational opportunities like I referred to that could be coming up within the next 24 months. When you don't have those, real estate just tends to go up in value in quality cities. And everybody knows that, and it feels expensive when you buy it, and then you realize 5 years later, you stole it back then at that point in time. I could change the name of my speech to Going Back to Normal, and we don't like it, all right? Cap rates are going back to normal, cost of borrowing's going back to normal. The only thing that's not going back to normal yet is your government is unwilling to balance their budget. And the repercussions for that are now relevant. If you heard me speak my first time in 1997, that's a long time ago, I said, don't worry about our budget. Sure, don't worry about it. We got debt, but it's not big enough to worry about. Just relax about that. Don't buy gold. Don't buy silver. Go ahead and buy real estate. Well, I'm changing my mind now because our government's starting to run deficits of $2 trillion a year, and I'm going to show you what the repercussions of that are. And it's going to answer a question. Did any of you, besides me, wonder why Jay Powell 3 or 4 weeks ago said, oh, we're going to cut rates 3 times next year, when 2 months before that, he didn't make any mention of doing that? I know things like that. I thought, wow, what did that guy see I'm not seeing here? He must have saw a monster, and he's going to get out in front of that. I can't find any monster in the economy either, but I did find a monster in the Treasury Department's budget. I'll show you that in a minute. Household net worth has gone up to $154 trillion. That's up $44 trillion in the last 3 years. You want to know why it costs a lot of money to get a Taylor Swift ticket? That's because wealthy people got money. Any place that you go, if you're going to go skiing in Aspen, you're going to go to a Formula One in Saudi Arabia or wherever they have stuff like that that I will never go to. Anywhere, my wife and I just bought a home in Wyoming. Part of the reason we didn't want to be in Colorado or Jackson, everybody goes, oh, so did you buy one in Jackson Hole? Answer was for us, no, it's in Laramie. I can't afford Jackson Hole because or Vail or any of those other places, because if the Sultan of Brunei is buying property in that market, you don't want to be competing with them. And that applies to the PGA golf tournament, the Golf Association too. It's no fun to be a buyer in a market competing with the Sultan of Brunei. He's a nice guy, I'm sure, but he's hard to outbid. And then here's another one. If you threw me in jail and said you could continue to make presentations virtually, but you only have one slide and you have 2 minutes, tell us if we're going to have a recession or not, this would be the one slide. We live in a capitalistic country, and capitalism is the greatest economic regime there is. Socialism, communism is a death sentence for freedom. Anybody that even teaches you to think like that, they need to pull them aside and let me have their phone number. I'll call them, okay? You don't typically have recessions until corporations start firing a lot of people, and they don't start firing a lot of people until profits are down. And what I'm seeing here is profits aren't down, and what I hear is earnings for the stock exchange are going to be higher this year. This is not the recipe for a recession at all. Let's try this again. Big companies, hiring plans, and sales. The outlook for sales of major corporations, 67% say they're going to have higher sales. And the bottom part there, 27% say they're going to hire more people. That is going down. There's no doubt about it that hiring desire and energy is lower now than it was a year ago. But still, we're going to have a lot of hiring going on. Small businesses, on the other hand, are also strong. 61% of owners are trying to hire people still. And of those hiring, 90% reported few or no qualified employees. This is a recipe for people say, oh, wage growth is slowing down. Boy, there's another killer. You want to lose a lot of money? Believe that for a moment, okay? 30% of business owners are going to continue raising selling prices. That was a survey done in September, reported in October. I haven't seen another one since. 22% reported inflation was their single most important problem, and 36% reported raising compensation. Wage growth in this country is baked in the cake for 4 to 5 years. I'll show you the facts about that in a minute. And when you bake in wage increases for 4 to 5, 6 years, virtually everything we do in this country depends on somebody that's earning a wage. And here's the facts on this. It takes a while to get these. These are one of the harder pieces of data for me to find. But let me just read off a couple of these so you'll get the idea. Ford employees get an immediate 11% increase, and over 4.5 years, it'll accumulate to 25%. New recruits get 68% hike. United pilots get 40% over the next 4 years. West Coast dock workers see 32% over 6 years. Airline mechanics got a pay raise of over 20% for 3 years. I look at that stuff, and I'm seeing 5 to 6% wage bumps built in every year for the next 4 to 6 years. When people talk about inflation being sticky, this is what makes inflation sticky. It's okay if the price of a Peloton bike goes down. Oh, that's impossible. It's from Cleveland, Ohio. I'm sure that's something I want to know. I'm sorry. I didn't even know that was on. Let's do this right now so I can think. That's a first. I should have taken the call and pretend it was my wife telling me she was going to divorce me or something. I could have had a little fun with you all for a few minutes, but that would be a waste of your time. It'd be fun though, but I wouldn't do it. Okay. People ask me, where did the workers go? I don't know. But one thing I found, I looked a lot. And what I found, for one thing, was disabilities, okay? What I found was that 3 million, in the last 3 years, 3 million more workers of working age are now collecting disability from Social Security. So there's where 3 million went. I don't know where the rest of them went. So my calculus for coming to my conclusion that we're not going to have a recession this year, the green are the ingredients to support that notion. The red is that, yeah, you could have one. You got continuing employment growth. Every month we get, what's the employment number, the Friday employment number? Every month it's 180,000. That's not the sign of a recession. Recessions begin when you are laying off people, not continuing to hire. Wages are growing rapidly for several years ahead. Consumers have a lot of debt capacity left. There's still a ton of money out there in checking and savings accounts. Corporate profits are high, and stock prices hit a record yesterday. The only drawbacks to that I see, constraints are consumers are constrained by the high prices of everything. It's not like they're tapped out. It's not like their credit scores are bad, their FICO scores. The problem is you go to the grocery store and everything is a lot more expensive than it was 2 years ago. And if your income didn't go up enough to offset that, inflation's gone, let's say, for fun, just a minute at the grocery store. Let's pretend it is. So let's say 0 inflation at the grocery store this year. Well, still, what that means is you're still going to the grocery store and everything that you buy is a lot more expensive than it was 2 years ago. And so that means you have to, if you pay more at the grocery store, you're going to have to pay a little less for playing golf or getting a new, I was going to say stereo, but those don't even exist anymore. I guess I just gave away the fact that I'm not 42 years old. But so what's the outlook for inflation? I'd like to show you, this slide is a little busy, but it's worth it if you'll stay with me for just a second. I feel like inflation is going to go down for a while, for about a 2-year window, and then it's going to start to go back up again. And that's going to be the final slide in my presentation. Is there maybe a window of opportunity to finance real estate long term at the lowest rates you're going to see for a while? Why am I saying that? Because everybody in this room is probably familiar with the concept of a weighted average cost of capital. Well, this is the weighted average of the core CPI. You buy eggs, you buy cars, you get some medical service, you pay rent. And each one of those has a weighting. You buy a little bit of eggs, you pay a lot of rent, and the weighted average of that is the CPI, in this case, core CPI. I did this back in September. This took a lot of time, and I won't be doing it every month. I don't need to. I just want to illustrate this concept. Core CPI at that point was 4.1%. And underneath that big number, the aggregate number of 4.1, there's different things. You buy gasoline and used cars. And so looky there, used cars were down. Medical services were down. Food away from home was up 6%. That's going to be one reason why restaurants are in demand. Because with wages going up, even if food levels out, you know that the sales revenue in restaurants is going to have to go up to cover the increase in wages and property taxes and also insurance and all the rest of this stuff you're aware of. Okay, but what I'm interested in right now is what might cause that window of low inflation and an opportunity to refi long-term at the lowest rate going forward. 33% of the CPI is just basically rent. They call it shelter, but it's measured by rent. And you see the core CPI at that point was 4.1, but under the covers there, under the hood, rent was going up 7%. Now what happens, we all know that rents in apartments aren't going up 7% anymore. In a lot of places, they're going up maybe 2% at best. Plenty of places where it's going up 0. So I would say probably right now the change in rental income for apartments is somewhere between 0 and 2. What would happen to the reported CPI if you took that 7.1 and that 7.4 out and replaced it in a couple of months with a 2 or a 1 or a 0? And so my conclusion here is that if the housing component of the CPI drops from 7 to 2, then the reported CPI goes down 1.65%. So if we could just magically say, hey, tomorrow everything else was still the same, what would happen is that the CPI would not be 4.1, it would be about 2.4%. This is an ingredient that's baked in the cake. The stated rent inside the CPI calculation is around 7, and it's going to be trending down toward 2 or 0. Now the question is, why don't they just do it overnight? And the answer is, there's a time involved. There's a gradualness to how this comes down. And so it's not going to happen overnight. So over the next 24 months, that housing component, that rent component is going to drop and drop and drop and drop until it hits, let's say, 0 or 2. Now think about that a minute. Part of the reason why multifamily rents are soft right now is because we have a huge glut of oversupply that came on last year and it's going to come on this year. But what happens the year after that? There's nothing. There's nothing in the pipeline. So you got this big supply surge that's going through the system that's going to suppress rental increases for about 2 years. And then you're going to have no new supply, and that's when the rent portion of the CPI starts going up from 0 to 2 or from 2 to 4. And that's where I think the window ends. So if we could magically snap our fingers and say, how long does it take rent to get down to where it's supposed to be? Nobody knows. And how long will it stay that low? Nobody knows that either. But I feel like somewhere between right now and 2026, there's going to be that window before rent starts going up again. It's possible the 10-year Treasury is as low as it's going to get right now, today. Okay, what about we're talking about inflation. I want to talk about the cost of money and transition into interest rates. We're running federal deficits. I get it. We've done it for years. Bill Clinton was the last president in office when we ran a surplus. You should be running surpluses when the economy's good. We're printing and giving away money like there's no tomorrow, and nobody, no Republican, no Democrat is talking about balance of budget, having fiscal integrity, nothing. That is dangerous. Most American people and most global investors would say, if you ask them today, do you think the US government has fiscal integrity? They'll protect the value of the dollar and avoid hyperinflation. I'll bet you 10 out of 10 people would say, of course they will. That's why the 10-year Treasury is 4% today, because people are betting on that. And Jay Powell, well, a lot of what he says matters too. Okay, so our debt has gone up to $34 trillion. But this chart right here, these are all from the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis. It's free data. You can have these in your office easy. Federal outlay for interest. So every month you got taxes coming in and you're spending money on all these different things, defense budget, whatever you can think of, including interest. In 2015, we paid $223 billion in interest. 5 years later, that was up 50% to $345 billion. And 3 years after that, it's $659 billion. And I've seen some numbers from the Congressional Budget Office that are hinting at the fact that this next year, the interest on the federal debt will be over $1 trillion. To put that in perspective, that'd be bigger than the entire defense budget. Social Security is $1.3 trillion. So what happens is, as this, you see that? You wonder what that is. You know, we're in a PhD seminar in economics and I ask you, what's that trend right there? Is that an L shape, a V shape, a U shape? That's called a hockey stick. You don't like seeing hockey sticks, especially when it's your interest expense. Get a load of this. This is the kind of stuff you do when you got a weird personality like me. I sat down and plotted out the weighted average cost of capital for the federal government. You know, they got long-term bonds, they got intermediate-term notes, and they got short-term bills. I found the data and the Treasury's information to calculate that, and it got down below 1%. Over a period of years of having 0% interest that long, the weighted average cost of debt, the federal government got down to about 1%. And so what happens when it goes from 1 back up to 2? Think about this every day. You want to know my opinion? No, you don't, but I'm going to give it to you anyhow. My opinion, why Jay Powell changed his mind and said we're going to lower 3 times in the next few months. I don't see any recession here, any monsters there. This is the monster. I think they're going to have a bad day in the media in the next 12 months when they come out and say, the interest expense of the federal government exceeded $1 trillion for the first time ever, and that's not sustainable, and either we're going to have to cut a lot of spending or we're going to have to raise a lot of taxes. One of those two things is going to happen, and I have never seen cutting spending at the federal government level in my life, so that probability is 0. So the only other way we do this is we raise taxes substantially. And we don't have to do that either. You go, hey, baloney, I don't want to raise taxes. Fine. I'll show you what the consequences are, and then we make investment decisions based on that. I don't hear anybody talk about raising taxes. I don't hear anybody talk about balancing the budget, so we probably won't. So then what do you got to watch out for? Hyperinflation, this is what you look for, and I've given STRIVE permission to distribute this to everybody, so I'm not going to hit these all. None of these are happening yet. We are not on the verge of hyperinflation in this country yet. The one that, if you don't want to watch anything else, just watch the value of the US dollar. You cannot have hyperinflation in America as long as the US dollar is strong. So let's just leave that at that for now. I want you to understand what we're dealing with here, because I want you to understand what investors are thinking about when they, quote, want to park some money in real estate, and maybe they're a little indifferent to what the yield is or the cap rate or anything else. It's just like, I want to park some money in real estate. This is part of the reason. I paid $12 to get this currency from a coin dealer. This is Hungary back in 1945. Their dollar was called the pengo. In July, they were printing 1,000 pengos. Let's pretend that bought a cup of coffee. Less than 6 months later, they're printing million pengos. So what that means is that million pengo now buys a cup of coffee that used to have 1,000 pengo did. And in June of '46, 7 months later, the number got too big, so they went to a letter. It's a B. That is a B pengo. So you have to find out what that is. It's a million. So it's a million of those. So now your cup of coffee is a B. A million. See, people ask me about, do you remember back a few years ago when you thought trillion was a big number and you didn't even know how big it was? It's like, if you stack dollar bills this high, it would go to the moon. 1 trillion of them would go to the moon and back. And at the time I said, oh no, there's way bigger numbers. We're going to need to get ready for the Q word coming up. Because a million is a quadrillion. And after that, there's a quintillion, a sestillion, an octillion, a nonillion, and a decillion. So here's what happens. After a while, the number gets so big, a quadrillion. Here, I'll give you a quadrillion pingos. Go buy me a cup of coffee. All of a sudden, you replace that with a new currency. I've already got a name for ours, if this would ever happen, which I hope it doesn't, but I'm alert to it because the ingredients are there to do this. I would call it the Patriot. Just turn in your quadrillion, and here's one Patriot. A forint, that was the new coin. We just got rid of the pingos, and it took me forever, and I don't know if this is totally right or not, but it's the only research I could find on it. One forint was 400 octillion pengo. See what happens? Your money's worth nothing. This is why people worry about inflation. This is why people worry about balancing the budget, because they don't want to have this happen. This is no fun when you go through this. And you think, well, I was 45 and hungry. Well, how about 2008 in Zimbabwe, 1993 in Yugoslavia? I paid money for that Zimbabwe. That's a $100 trillion bill right there. And that would buy you a cup of coffee at a certain point in time there too. And it's happening now. Turkey, inflation's 59%. They raised interest rates to 30%. Argentina right now, inflation hit 138% and interest rates have increased to 118%. This is what you do when you let things get out of the hand. The New York City mayor has let things get out of hand. He's writing checks he can't cash. He's going to bankrupt himself and his city. And our government is doing the same thing by printing and giving away money like they're doing at this pace now. They're doing exactly the same thing. It just takes a lot longer because this country is so strong and so vibrant that you can bankrupt this country. And this is why people are going to continue to want to own commercial real estate, because there's plenty of people that have been worried about this. Trust me, audiences like this, I've done about 1,900 of these now, and there's plenty of people that are totally worried about inflation for the last 30 years, and that's part of the reason they've been buying commercial real estate their whole career, going back 30 or 40 years, because in the back of their mind, they know this happens. And right now, I've never seen anything like this. Our government is just throwing money at everything and no talk about any consequences of this at all. And the American people aren't aware of it either. That's why I'm bullish about commercial real estate. Really what happens is you really got two alternatives: buy gold and buy commercial real estate, and farmland. Farmland is a great option too. So the outlook for interest rates for me is the Fed needed to raise rates high enough to create a recession, and they didn't do it, okay? I would argue the Fed really hasn't done anything in the fight of inflation. It's just gone down by accident because nobody wants to buy a Peloton anymore. Other things that you bought during COVID, you don't want those anymore. So goods have gone down in price, and that's good, but services continue to rise because of the wages. And what this shows here is what the Fed does to create recessions. At one point, it took 19% interest rates to get recession under control. What I want to do is show you this slide about why we're not even in a recession. And recessions typically is what it takes to get rid of inflation. Continuing claims for unemployment, when I first file a claim, I'm an initial claim. The next week, I'm a continuing claim. And I'm a continuing claim till I get a job. Those vertical gray bars there are recessions. And what you can see there is what happens to unemployment when you get a significant recession going. You end up with 4.5, 3.5, 6.5 million people unemployed. And right now, we're sitting at 1.8 million. They haven't moved the needle. The Fed has been talking for 2 years about how we need to soften up the labor market. I've had fun with that, going around the audiences saying, you know what that means when the chairman of the Fed says we need to soften up the labor market? That means we need to get about 3.5 million people on continuing claims, and we haven't even started. That's why I think inflation is going to come back again within about 2 years. But this window of opportunity over the next 2 years of rent going down is going to show that CPI going down, and it's possible the 10-year Treasury could continue to go down as well. Okay, I want to show you this slide. This is what I call return to normal. The last time I saw, in my mind, a normal financial market would have been 2002 to 2006, even 7. And then the government, the Federal Reserve, started manipulating the financial markets, and they continue to do it to this day. And I was just curious, like, maybe we will go back to normal. And the 10-year Treasury ranged at that point from 3.25% to 5%. It's 4% right now. It could be in a normal range. It is in a normal range right now. The 30-year fixed rate mortgage was 5.25% to 6.75%, and the Fed funds rate over that period of time ranged from 1% to 5.25%. We're kind of in a normal zone right now. Actually, everybody's hoping for lower interest rates. Well, what you're hoping for is something that's not normal. And the only reason you get lower interest rates when it's not normal is because there's a big financial catastrophe in the financial markets and the banking system. And I don't feel like that's going to happen this time around. The banks have a fortress balance sheet. So I don't see any threat to the financial system that would cause 10-year Treasuries and mortgages and Fed funds to go back way low. This is kind of what it's going to look like. I think maybe they'd lower the Fed funds rate some, maybe back down to 3.5, something like that, and then pause for a while. And it's possible that the 10-year Treasury doesn't go down any more than it is right now. They're not tied together. It's another misnomer. Do not get confused by what you hear on TV, that the Fed's lowering the Fed funds rate and that will take the 10-year Treasury down. That is not an accurate statement. It's very possible that the Fed can lower interest rates on the Fed funds rate and the 10-year Treasury doesn't go anywhere. So let me close by talking about the outlook for commercial real estate. Green Street, their estimate, which they're pretty good, but they don't know everything by any stretch, but they're measuring prices down 20% from their 2022 peak, and office property values have fallen 31% since last year. Hey, just for fun, everybody's all excited about I said Chat GDP in Houston a couple of days ago. So I'm just calling him Chat now. Me and Chat are first name basis. People are wondering about, am I going to have a job next year? So I asked Chat, it's like, from my standpoint. Why did cap rates go up? And I thought, see what chat says compared to me, because then I will be out of a job. But for the most part, up-to-date and accurate information on recent changes in cap rates, it'd be advisable to consult with real estate markets, industry analysis, and speak with real estate professionals. That's a good answer. That would be my answer too. My advice to people in the industry is whatever you do, don't give away your information. Please don't do what the residential realtors did and give away their information and let then other competitors use it against them, Zillow and Redfin, whatever that might be. So what does matter when it comes to cap rates? People will say, well, the 10-year Treasury, that's probably about as good as it can get. And we all know that the 10-year Treasury goes down when the Fed funds rate goes down. No, it doesn't. The 10-year Treasury doesn't necessarily go down when the Fed funds rate goes down at all. It can actually go up. The best proxy that I've found for cap rates is the BB corporate bond rate. This is an easy one to get. The Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis is published every month. I looked at BBB bonds, which have less risk, and that's not a good proxy. That rate is always lower than real estate. I looked at single B, riskier bonds. That's not good either because that rate is always way higher than real estate. This BB corporate bond rate is an excellent proxy for trends in cap rates. The caveat I have with this is that the bond market has a lot more volatility than the real estate market does. And so this BB can go up a lot because of overexuberance, and it can go down a lot because of market overreaction. So there's a lot more volatility in this piece of information than cap rates, but I think the overall trend is pretty good. So what I'm seeing here is we should expect some increase. It's no surprise to us looking at this that what we saw in cap rates compared to 2022 have gone up. It's going back to normal. Institutional allocation for commercial real estate, it's really interesting. 32% of those institutions said they're above their target allocation. And that's the first time in 10 years that that's ever happened. The good news is, as their stock portfolio has gone up, all of a sudden their real estate portion of the total portfolio is down. So institutions are still in the game. Here's their preferences for what they want to buy. And they'll take a little bit of everything. A lot of focus on multifamily and industrial still, for sure. Work from home, what is it, 2%? Leadership has plans to bring people back to the office full-time. That's 1%. 54%, we have no plans to bring back everyone full-time to the office. That was already discussed. I felt like the information provided there was really helpful and useful, so I don't need to belabor this, other than it's creating a lot of problems for the retailers in the downtown area. And then with this, I want to close with this. Yeah. An old-time economist back in Washington, D.C. told me about 20 years ago that every economist should use the word "in conclusion" to give their audience hope. So I just did. This is the last slide. We can take a Q&A for a few minutes if we like, which I would enjoy. Okay, I've already kind of explained this, but I feel like there's going to be a window to get money at the most reasonable price that we're going to see for a while. And I also think that's going to create a buying opportunity for commercial real estate. And we need to talk about price discovery. If I forget that, and don't ask me that in Q&A, let's talk about price discovery for a while. I think that the reported rate of inflation is going to be lower for the next 2 years because the housing component of the CPI drops due to heavy new supply of multifamily, okay? Meanwhile, wages continue to increase for the next 3 to 5 years, putting upward pressure on inflation. And the next inflation impulse will come in 2025 or 26 when apartment rents begin to increase at a higher rate because of the lack of starts and completions. If I was going to change anything on this slide, I would probably say it will come in 26 or 27. I don't think this is going to happen at the end of next year, okay? So with that said, let me make a couple of comments about transaction or price discovery, because everybody in this room and every room I'm around are waiting for price discovery. It's like we all know that, like 1986, you had a change in policy that had an overnight impact on values. We've had a change in policy here in the last 18 months, and it has had an impact on value, but anytime you have these big impacts in value, there's a quiet period where there's not many deals going on, and the reason for that is because nobody knows what stuff's worth. And so price discovery happens over time gradually. Price discovery usually happens when a seller that doesn't want to recognize a loss is forced to recognize a loss, either through a foreclosure or a divorce or a death in the family. And suddenly that property comes on the market because dad owned it, he overpaid for it, he was never going to sell it at a 7 cap because he didn't want to admit to his friends that he had to do that. Dad's gone, we got no ego in this thing, we want the money, let's sell this thing, I don't care what cap it sells for, sell it. And you get 3 or 4 comps off of that situation, and then you've got price discovery. And what happens typically is that takes longer than we would like. I hope that starts to, it feels to me like it's starting to thaw, that market is thawing. It's not thawed out yet, but here's what you got to watch for is, take some market, it doesn't matter what it is, but let's just say not enough transactions, nobody knows what the price per square foot is. And all of a sudden, you get that first distress comp, and it's off 20%. And then a few months later, you get a second one, and it's off 20%. And then you get a third one, and it's off 21%. All of a sudden, the appraisal side of the industry has some comps to show it appears that that floor is about minus 20%. Once the greater investment community gets that feeling that that floor is in at minus 20, what happens is then you get a bid for the next comp and it's only minus 19. And then there's another 19, and then there's a 17. And then all of a sudden you go from no transaction volume to a ton, because people realize we've missed the bottom. We're no longer worried about catching the falling knife. The knife has fallen, and we've already lost out on 6 months worth of price appreciation that's gone on already. And there is enormous sums of money out there that want to come back into real estate. People that own it now, people that bought some made a big mistake. It's like, hey, you know, if you're in the business 30 years, it's possible you can buy at the wrong time occasionally over 30 years. So what? That doesn't mean we're going to not buy in the future, because Mark Dotzour is right. When you have that kind of budget deficit every year, and you've got a government running $2 trillion every year, and the cost of interest is going up hockey stick like that, there's a big reason why a lot of people want to own real estate, and they really don't care what the cap rate is. So anyhow, that's where the buying opportunity comes in. I feel like, in my own opinion, it's in the next 24 months or so. So with that said, we could take a question or two if you like.
If you have a question, we have microphones. We'll bring them to you, and you can
yeah, and if you,
ask a question there. I would like to remind everybody we need your name tags back, because you'll drop those on the table. We've got one right here in the front.
I agree with almost everything you had to say. I guess the question I have is, price discovery is going to occur when we see unemployment goes up, and that starts to trigger defaults, starts to trigger people can't pay their bills. We've already seen credit card rates skyrocket, and credit card rates defaults are skyrocketing. Automobile foreclosures or repossessions are at the highest rate. And these are the kind of things you just don't know when it's going to trigger this to happen. I think it could be a lot sooner than you think. I think it could be this year. What do you think about that, if you consider those factors?
Well, I would keep my fingers crossed and hope that happens, because the sooner the market clears, the sooner the prices will start to go up from whatever people thought they were. And that will take a lot of default risk off the rest of the marketplace. It's like we're not minus 35%, we are minus 19%, and all of a sudden we're not losing our building anymore. So I hope that happens. And it's possible.
Would you have suggested the Fed should have kept raising rates over this period of time? They chickened out on them?
Would I suggest that they keep raising rates? I think they're fine. I think they made a mistake by saying we're going to start lowering them right now. But again, I don't understand why they did that. I still don't. I think it's a mistake, but I make a lot of mistakes too. Yeah. Is there another question? Yes.
Question for you. There was a show on 60 Minutes here 3-4 weeks ago, and just showed some of the developers that are doing some really interesting things in New York City, turning office space into multifamily or condos and stuff. I mean, they're just talking about massive amounts of, vacancies and all of these, leases that are coming due even over the next 2-3 years. I mean, do you see bubbles or anything like that in office or any other industry?
Okay, so number one, it's a cool idea to change an office building into multifamily, but it's really expensive. Those buildings aren't really designed for that, so the cost of doing that is enormous. You might be able to get away with that in places like New York where there's limited supply and high prices, but economic feasibility of that is pretty low in Tulsa or Wichita or parts of Texas for that matter either. So I don't see that going forward. Do I see a bubble? I would say this. I see the prices that were paid in 2022 compared to 2020, and I think that's probably going to disappear. Whatever happened in those 2 years, probably it's already disappeared. It is, in my mind, that's already disappeared. And so if you want to call that a bubble, you can. I just see that's my take, is that whatever happened there from 2021 till today, that's probably going to disappear totally. And for some buildings, that's going to look like a pretty big discount. But when you look at the cap rates, they're not that much different than they were 2-3 years ago. And like I mentioned, commercial real estate as a group could fall $15 trillion. And the value would be just back to where it was 2 or 3 years ago. So I'm not going to call it a bubble. I'm just going to say people bought too high under financing conditions that don't exist anymore. It's not because they were dumb. They don't exist anymore. And so the price that was paid in 2022 is no longer operative in 2024 because the rules have been changed. And so that's how I would be viewing deals. It's like, if it's off 15%, all I see there is a deal that's off 15% from 2022. All I see is a deal that's back priced to full price that people were paying in 2020. People weren't stupid in 2020. They were sharpening their pencil. They were looking at 100 deals to buy 3 of them. And so they weren't stupid then. So I would say if we go back to price levels of 2020, that would be a reasonable assumption. And so if that's lower than what somebody bought it for in 2022, that's basically just a mistake they made. They couldn't help it, didn't know necessarily, but it is. And you pay a price for your mistakes, and then you just you move on and stay in the game.
Yeah, what impact do you foresee for the presidential race on interest rates and inflation?
My candidate's not running, so I don't know. I've always been, for 30 years, I've been a fan of Pee Wee Herman. And Pee Wee got caught in a little indiscretion there. And he hasn't been running since then. And since Pee Wee's gone, I haven't found any candidates interesting. I don't think either candidate's going to do what needs to be. I don't hear either candidate. I'll tell you what I would do. It'd be kind of interesting if one of those two candidates said, we got to balance the budget. That'd be a game changer. But any of the rest of it, I'm not interested. I don't like either party. I don't see them solving any problems. I wouldn't vote for any of them. Calvin Coolidge was another favorite of mine. I like Ike. I got that button too. This stuff now just.
We'll go last one up there.
Yeah.
You mentioned earlier the kind of housing crisis that we don't really have a solution for.
Yeah.
As the middle class is no longer able to afford their first-time homes in their 20s, sometimes even 30s, in a place that they can go work and make a living.
Yeah.
How do you see that playing out the next generation with the middle class not being able to afford anything?
I see it playing out already. I see 25-year-olds talking about things like, I'm paraphrasing them, but it's like, I don't have any loyalty to an employer. They don't have any loyalty to me. I can work 40 hours a week, 45 hours a week, and I can't get close to buying a house. My version of the American dream does not include homeownership, and I hold the federal government totally responsible for that. During Dodd-Frank, we put the thumb down on community banks all over America to make loans for land development. That's where the money came from. And Dodd-Frank shut that off, and they never turned it back on. And here we are 16 years later, we got no supply. We need to be building thousands, hundreds of thousands of homes. And we're not willing to do it. And so it's having repercussions. It saddens me, honestly, very seriously saddens me. Because I remember when I was in my early 20s, and I could go to work and I could buy a house. It was really expensive. Every home I've ever bought in my entire life has felt like it was incredibly expensive at the time I bought it. That doesn't bother me. But this idea of institutional buyers owning real estate too, it's like, okay, what are we doing here? So pension fund decides to invest with BlackRock or Blackstone or Black Pebble, whatever one it is, I don't care. And all of a sudden you've got 25,000 homes under management of some big corporation, some big fund to the benefit of really rich people. And meanwhile, the 25-year-old, him and his wife or whatever, teaching school and stuff like that, they're lucky if they can even pay rent. I think that's wrong too. But there's a lot of stuff that we do in this country. Capitalism's not perfect. Socialism is way worse. But it's what it is. It's what we do. And yeah, it's having. The interesting thing is affordable housing is coming in this state. I've seen it. I've taken pictures of it. Affordable housing in this state, people laughed about that because I crack jokes way too often and then people never know if I'm not cracking a joke or not. RV parks are popping up everywhere in this state. You want to see, you know, if you have any interest in a hobby of astronomy, a nebula up in that sky, it's known as kind of a cradle for creating new stars. There's hot gas and there's dust and gravity and stars are being created in there. I've seen that nebula of a hotbed of affordable housing being created here in Texas. And if you want to see it and invest in it, make the drive from Bastrop to San Marcos on Highway 21. Check it out. I've been watching that for 12 years now. I remember walking into the biggest one there and asking the lady at the office, I said, I probably had this suit on, wouldn't be surprised, wasn't like it anyhow. And I said, I'm an economist with A&M. This is going to be the dumbest question you hear all day. And she looked me in the eye. It's kind of like a bait shop / office. And she looked me in the eye and goes, I doubt it. And I thought, you and I are family, man. I like you right now. I said, how many people in here live here versus being a snowbird or something? All of them. She said half of them are here permanently now, and the other half are construction workers that are working on a big utility construction that's going to take 3 or 4 years. And so that's where affordable housing is going. RV parks outside of the jurisdiction of kind-hearted, I better stop right there, planners, kind-hearted planners that want you to have everything that you can't afford. It's happening. If I was going to take a PhD dissertation right now, I would use that as a case study for the emerging trend of affordable housing. It's a combination of single-family homes on smaller lots outside of the ETJs. It's also a combination of RV parks. It's also a combination of manufactured homes. And you've got little restaurants that are in old houses now right there on the street with a few convenience stores going in at the same time. It's all creating right there. That is the reality of affordable housing in Texas and would be anywhere else in any other state that has positive job growth. And tiny homes, same kind of thing, 600 square feet for $110,000 plus the lot. That's what we're getting. And then you wonder why a 24-year-old doesn't have a whole lot of loyalty because she just saw 2,000 people get laid off with an email. And it's like, I can't live anywhere without 2 roommates. So it's a problem. You reap what you sow. That's how it works. And I just hope we stop sowing $2 trillion deficits every year because the repercussions of that are massive. So thanks for your kind attention. Thanks for inviting me to be here.
All right, thank you all for coming. Hang around if you want to for a little bit. We appreciate it. We'll see you next year.